Dear students, today the topic for discussion is present status of agriculture in India. Before we discuss in detail, let us see what is the scenario regarding agriculture. Agriculture is the largest provider of livelihood in rural India. It contributes about 25% to India's GDP, but gradually the contribution to India's GDP of agriculture is coming down, and presently it is about 18.5%. It is still dependent primarily on the monsoons. The growth in agricultural production has been stagnant for the past several years. Actually, for the last decade or 15 years, it has actually been stagnant. And the drought in northern and western parts of the country during the financial year of 2009 created shortages in supply of food grains. So you can see that a drought year can sometimes affect the supply of food grains. So agriculture is an extremely important activity and very important for the economy. And let's now try to understand the role of agriculture in greater detail. As you see from this table of contribution of GDP over the years, we find that the contribution of agriculture has declined from 38% in 1980 to 22% in 2003, and presently it is down to around 18.5%. While on the other hand, the contribution of industry has almost more or less stayed the same during this time period. And very strikingly, we find that the contribution of service industry has increased from 36% in 1980 to around 51% in 2003, and currently it is around 53%. So, agriculture is gradually taking a backseat as far as the Indian economy is concerned, and the contribution of the service industry is gradually rising. Now, let us try to understand that what are the reasons for this decline, and also, in what way agriculture still stands out. Let's try to find out what have been the agricultural achievements. And what we find is that India ranks second highest worldwide in farm output. India is the largest producer of tea, milk, mangoes, sugarcane, banana, turmeric, coconut, pulses, ginger, cashew nuts, and black pepper. It is the second highest producer in the world of wheat, rice, sugar, vegetables, fruits, groundnut, and cotton. And India accounts for 10% of the world's fruit production. So this is not a mean achievement. This is something really very worthy of being proud of. But at the same time, there are certain factors which are affecting agriculture in a rather adverse way. Let us try to find out what they are. What we find is that in agriculture, we have very small and fragmented land holdings. What it means is that the land holdings are gradually becoming smaller and smaller. During the time we gained independence, about 35% of the land holdings were about 4 hectares and less. But now, the figure has risen to around 67%. So you can see that the holdings are gradually becoming smaller and smaller. Second factor which affects agriculture is the dependence on the monsoon. Sometimes there are floods in the country, sometimes there is a drought, and accordingly it affects the agricultural production. Then the third factor is lack of international competitiveness of the produce. India's products are not so competitive worldwide. Quality-wise, India still has a lot to improve. Then the fourth is inadequate availability of electricity, fertilizers, irrigation, and pesticides. Fourth is poor access of the farmers to good roads, market infrastructure, refrigerated transportation of goods. So what it results in is that the farmer is not able to get his produce across to the markets in time. It takes the transportation costs are very high. Sometimes because he is not having refrigerated trucks to cart the produce which is perishable, then a lot of produce is lost also in the process. And then also, why agriculture is getting affected is because the land which was earlier used for agriculture is now gradually getting converted for different land uses, like residential houses are coming up, sometimes shopping malls are coming up. So the land available for agriculture is gradually getting diverted to some other land uses. Now let us try to find out what is the share of agricultural export, and we find that in 2003-4 the share of agriculture and allied products in total exports was around 12.4%, which came down to 10.5% in 2004-5, and now it came down to 10.2% in 2005 and 6. So gradually the exports in agricultural commodities is also coming down. This is a serious concern. On one hand there is stagnation in agricultural production, and on the other hand the share of exports in the of agriculture in total exports is also coming down. Now what we find is that India is basically a land of dichotomy. On one hand we can say that India is basically composed of two Indias. One is India and the other is Bharat. India is the one which stays in the urban area and which contributes to the national economy through industrialization, and the other is Bharat, which stays primarily in the rural areas. Now what is happening is that both have changed over the period of time. Ever since we have gained independence, both have changed dramatically, but the change has not been uniform across all sections, and what it has resulted in is that there is a big dichotomy between the urban class and the rural class. Now let us try to find out what has been the transformation for rural India. And what we find is that sometimes the change has definitely been for the better. Now let us find out in what way. One is that innovative farming techniques has brought prosperity in some areas. But on the other hand, there are some areas which are also reporting farmers' suicides. So this is a big dichotomy with which India is faced today. Poverty still exists, but changes are visible that are transforming rural lifestyles. You will find that in the rural areas also, people are, have access to mobiles. They are driving vehicles, which was not the case some years back. Another transformation has been that now in the rural areas they have easy access to finance. Earlier they were in the clutches of the money lenders, and sometimes that also led to the loss of their farmland. But gradually, with the efforts of the government, the farmers have more easy access to finance. Then another transformation that has happened is that the prices of rural land has gradually increased. So the result has been that sometimes the people are realizing the increased value of their land holdings, they're selling out and they're migrating to the urban areas. Then another transformation that has happened is that social welfare schemes have also been introduced to increase the employment opportunities in the rural areas, which has actually empowered them. So there have been some changes which have been for the good, some changes which have not been so good, and overall the scenario in the rural areas have definitely changed. But we can say overall it has been for the better. Now let us try to find out what is the plight of a farmer, a common farmer in the rural area. What we find is that the farmer is trapped in a vicious circle of, first he has a low risk-taking ability. This results in low investment that he can make on his land. That ultimately results in low productivity. So with the result that his bargaining power in the market is also very weak. Finally, that leads to low value addition. He's not able to make any more investments. He cannot take that risk, and the cycle just continues. So the farmer continues to be trapped in the vicious cycle of not being able to invest as much as is required because of his low risk taking ability. Now, this situation makes the farmer and the Indian agribusiness globally uncompetitive despite the abundant natural resources. Now, let's find out what is the rural classification, how people are, you can say, classed in the rural areas. We find there, also the classification is quite wide, and all sections of the rural sector are very widely different from each other. We find one is of course the class of very poor. They are constrained into a single activity, they lack labor, and often are unable to migrate. So that is, maybe they might be themselves serving as landless laborers in the rural areas. They don't have much choice. Then we have the insecure poor. They can diversify to supplement their income. They are marginal landholders, and basically they have more flexibility than the poor, but not so much either. Then we have the class of the secure poor. They can diversify to mitigate their risk. They are more likely to have irrigated land, and some of their household members may be in non-farm employment, which adds on to the family income. Then we have the class of the rich, who can diversify further to increase their income. They have irrigated land, capital, education. They may be in trading or in salaried employment. And then, of course, comes the class of the very richest. They basically specialize in commercial agriculture. They have large land, machinery, and they specialize in commercial crops and dairy farming. So you can see that the classification in the rural sector ranges from very poor to the very rich, and accordingly they are able to use the resources. What we find is that one, of course, is the farm output from which they make their living, but also there is a need which is felt to increase other employment activities in the rural areas. So what are the factors which lead to more employment in the rural areas? Now let us try to understand what is the need for income generating activities in the rural areas. First is that it leads to diversification of rural income, and agriculture is still very largely dependent upon the monsoon. So they need some other income apart from agriculture to tide them through the times when there is a flood or when there is a drought year. Third is that rural India suffers from disguised employment. What is meant by disguised employment? Disguised employment is that, let us say, there is some work which can be done by 2 people, and if there are 5 people who are engaged in doing the same amount of work because they have nothing else to do, that is what is known as disguised employment. And this is very rampant in the rural area because they don't have any other activity to have income from. So that is why they resort to being employed in an activity which can basically be done by lesser number of people. Then alternatives of income generation at the rural level would desist them from migrating to urban areas. It would also empower the rural men and women, as it would upgrade their skills as well as reduce their dependence on the farm sector. And then involvement in non-farm activities also fosters greater community involvement when self-help groups are formed. So these are some of the reasons because of which we need to generate more employment in the rural areas. Now the government has introduced several programs for income generation in the rural areas, and some of them are like earlier it was IRDP, which was income generating assets were provided through subsidy and credit. Another was TRISEM. The third was DWACRA. And finally, all these 3 schemes were merged, and in 1999, the government launched Swarn Jayanti Gram Swaraj Gar Yojana, that was known as SGSY, and this lays emphasis on the organization of poor into self-help groups and the capacity building. It is a credit cum subsidy program. Another of the program that was launched was SGRY. This was also merged from after the two employment schemes of GJSY and EAS were merged, and in 2001 SGRI was launched, which is the Sampoorn Gram Rozgar Yojana. This is the creation of sustained employment opportunities for securing a minimum level of employment and income for the rural poor through creation of durable community, social and economic assets. Then recently, as you all are aware, NREGA has been launched, that is National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, which basically is that any household would be guaranteed 100 days of employment in a year once they make an application that they are willing to do unskilled work. And the workers who opt to work under NREGA, they cannot be paid lower than the government rates which have already been minimum wages which have already been sanctioned by the government, and this has led to at least some assured employment in the rural areas. It has also led to increase in infrastructure in the rural areas, so this has led to better roads, then also water harvesting, then some power reforms with the result that more electricity is available in the rural areas, and the NREGA money has also provided a fillip to the demand for durable and consumer non-durables. So this has overall it has had the impact of increasing the rural income. Now this is as far as the government sector is concerned and their efforts in generating more income for the rural sector. Now there have also been a lot of stories and success stories of entrepreneurship. Many of the farmers, they have taken to other income generating activities in order to augment their income. And some of them I am just telling you about, but there have been many more actually. When one farmer in Telangana is selling drip irrigation systems and micro irrigation techniques to nearby farmers. Earlier he was leading a hand-to-mouth existence. Today he is actually driving a car. So you can see how much difference it has made to him, because he is not only using the system himself, he is also selling it to other farmers. Then farmers in Telangana are growing red jowar bajra seeds, and they already have a buyback arrangement with a seed company who buy from them at a predetermined price. So they already know whatever they produce, that will be bought by the seed companies. So they have, you can almost say how successful it has been, that they are producing about 70% of the seeds in that area for jowar, and each of the family which is employed, let us say there are 25,000 farmers who are growing the seeds, they are giving income to about 25,000 families. So it has also led to increase in employment generation. Then a farmer in Barabanki started growing mint along with his other crops. So the menthe oil which was produced from the mint has proved to be a money spinner for him, because of that many menthe units have come up in that area. Then Gosaiganj farmers are doing beekeeping and have made Lucknow the top producer of honey in the state. Then another area in which they can increase their income has been through agri-tourism. That is that a lot of people are interested in going to the villages, trying to find out how they live, and they are very keen to cash in on that particular need of the people, and that is what has spurred the activity in agri-tourism. Then there are some more success stories. That is a Madurai farmer. He changed from growing traditional crop of to grapes. He was growing coffee earlier, he started growing grapes, and then he finally even became an exporter. Then a Bangalore farmer, he has become a social entrepreneur and has ensured computerization of land records, so that it has resulted in less disputes and at the same time, people have also come to realize what is the value of their land holdings. Then farmers are growing 3 crops a year with drip irrigation, and some have also diversified to horticulture. Young women in Thiruvananthapuram district are making cloth bags and office files, which are very environment friendly, and they're also making some pen and paper. So this has also given them some employment, from which they can earn a good sum every month. Then jacquard looms have been established to produce handloom cloth. Cold storages have been also set up to keep the produce fresh, and a cooperative in Mehsana has installed bulk milk cooler plants to prevent wastage of milk products. So what you find is that on one hand, there are so many schemes which are being introduced by the government, they are being run and very successfully, and on the other hand there are a lot of entrepreneurship which has also emerged in the rural sector so that they can augment their income, and they have been highly successful too. The effort should be to keep the people who are working in the rural sector there and give them more opportunities so that they are able to not only make their ends meet but also increase their income and have a better standard of living. Now what the ASSOCHAM study finds out is that the rural per capita income is expected to increase from rupees 7,335 rupees in 1981 to rupees 15,396 at a compounded annual growth rate of 2.5%. The rural income this is the per capita that I have just told you about, and the rural income is expected to increase from 8 lakh crores in 2001 to 13 lakh crores in 2011, which is an increase of almost 60% in a decade. So this is really impressive, but there is always scope for improvement and it can always go higher. Now we come to discussing what is the role played by government, by the cooperatives, by agribusiness in controlling and stabilizing the prices. But before that, we need to understand the marketing of agricultural produce, how it is done, what are the lacunae, and how we can overcome so that ultimately better products and better prices can prevail and farmers are paid a good amount for their produce. What we find is that the market is either regulated or unregulated, and the unregulated market is primarily in the hands of the middlemen who are charging very high commission, they have no open auction, they have no proper weighing, they make a lot of deductions, and they don't make any prompt payment. And the farmer is not in a position to protest because he does not have access to better marketing framework. So the government has stepped in and it has regulated the markets, and at the same time also some cooperatives, they have also stepped in to make increasingly the agricultural marketing more profitable, and also they would help in the export of the agricultural produce. Now let us find out how the government is stabilizing prices. We find that the government announces the minimum support prices for agri-commodities that help to control the prices. It procures the commodities as buffer stock, which is stocked in the government's granaries. Then the government supplies also the agri-commodities to the poorer sections of the society at controlled rates through the public distribution system. Public warehouses have been established for storing and distributing agricultural produce and farm supplies. So during the time when there is a shortage, then the government releases more stock, and that helps to stabilize the prices. The government also regularly conducts raids on hoarders to check black marketing. Then another way in which the government is stabilizing the prices is by improving the marketing of the agricultural produce, that is through regulated markets, constructing warehouses, grading and standardizing produce, standardizing weights and measures, and providing information on agricultural prices. So the result is that it results in better prices to the producers, and at the same time there are no middlemen who would be able to take high profits at the cost of the farmer, and they are able to sell the products to the consumer, the ultimate consumer, at a lower price compared to the unregulated markets. The government also bans the export of commodities that are in short supply. For example, in 2006, it banned the export of lentil because there had been a fall in the production, and they decided that instead of exporting, we would rather sell in our own country, and so the export was banned. And so accordingly it raises or reduces the import duty or export duty depending upon the demand and supply situation in the country. So this is as far as the role of the government in stabilizing prices. Now we come to the role of the cooperatives in stabilizing prices, and what we find is that the cooperatives marketing society, they link credit, farming, marketing and processing to the best advantage of the farmers. It also has its own storage and warehousing facilities. It eliminates many of the middlemen, and so they are not able to take any unfair profit margins. The cooperative societies also undertake supply of such inputs such as seeds, fertilizers, implements as are required by the farmers. And the cooperative marketing is the best method to reorganize rural marketing and to promote planned growth of our rural areas. So for this purpose, NCDC, that is the National Cooperative Development Corporation, NAFED, and a lot of other organizations have been established to take care of the farmers' marketing needs through the cooperatives. Now we come to the role of agro-processing in stabilizing the prices. As you know, agro-processing is for minimizing the losses. It is to add value, to achieve high quality standards, and to give a fair price to the producer, because the produce that is sold in the market, that is not allowed to go waste. That is processed, some value is added to it, and then it is sold in the market. Now the food processing sector is growing, but it still falls short of the requirement. India's share in processing of fruits and vegetables is only about 1%, which is very, very low. In the other countries it is very high. It sometimes even goes up to something like 40 to 50%, but in India it is very low. So a lot of agricultural produce is wasted because of lack of processing. Although India is growing, but at the same time there is a lot of scope for improvement, and growth in food processing was 6.5% in 2003-04, and it has increased to about 13.5% in 2006 and 7. There has been a national policy on food processing which has been announced, and it aims at increasing the level of food processing to 10% by 2010 and 25% by 2025. So with the increase in agro-processing, we definitely can hope for better prices. Let's try to find out how. First is that the cold chain established in agro-processing preserves perishables and allows the products to be available when fresh produce is not available. Secondly, the needs of the different regions can be catered to, because it can preserve the produce and can transport the produce from areas of surplus to areas of shortage. Then thirdly, the total output produced can be consumed, so the food security can also be achieved. Now we come to discussing the different kinds of agricultural farming, and one is of course the traditional way in which farming was done. Then came the modern way and organic way, and let's try to find out what is a different way in which farming was done. And first let us discuss the traditional agriculture. The modern day agriculturists, they say that the traditional way was very backward, although this has been disputed by Mr. John Walker, who was given this assignment of coming to India and studying the traditional methods of farming. And what he reported back was that in traditional agriculture is very, very scientific. And he says in many areas it cannot be improved upon. Let us say what he had to say. He says that they had a very well developed system of irrigation. They used to do their irrigation through wells, which was extremely good because they had a very scientific way of digging the wells and then hauling the water up, then irrigating the fields, and that was one of the best ways in which they could have irrigated their fields. Then they had a very scientific rotation system, that is slow and quick growing crops, they were alternately used. Then deep rooted and shallow plants, again they could coexist together. So this actually helped to maintain the fertility of the soil. Then the plowing and tilling was such that it helped to retain the moisture of the soil. What happened was that nowadays the tractors are used. The tractors, they depress the soil. They depress the soil, and the result is that it does not stay porous, and the water is not able to permeate down to the lower level. What normally used to happen in traditional agriculture, it was done with the help of a plow that helped to retain the moisture of the soil, and that added to the fertility. Then the mixing of clay was done with the soil so that they could also grow other crops. So this was all very scientifically managed. They could grow more crops, and the yield was also very good. They used to not use pesticides. They used to do the weeding by hand. So then there was no question of any soil damage at all. Then also the traditional farmers always were depending upon their own labor as well as that of their relatives. So they were not dependent on outside labor. And they were very environment friendly. So this is what Mr. John Walker had to say, and he said that traditional farming in India was one of the best that was practiced anywhere in the world, and it was very unlikely that anybody could actually improve upon it. So let's try to find out what is the different type of farming that is practiced in India. One is the shifting cultivation, that is the plot of land to be cultivated is used and then it is abandoned. This is also known as jhum cultivation in the northeast. It's primarily practiced in the northeast, and once the land has lost its fertility, it is abandoned. Then they move on to the next area, again clear up the forest, again start farming, and then once that also loses its fertility, they move on further. Then the second type of farming is the subsistence farming, where the farmer grows the crops only to feed his own family. The third is intensive farming, that is intensive use of fertilizers, of hybrid varieties, of pesticides, so that the more crop can be grown. It increases crop production, but at the same time it also damages the environment. Then the next is extensive farming, which is here there is a low input of materials in terms of pesticides, in terms of fertilizers and labor, so that it can preserve the ecological balance and the farm can be used for a very, very long period of time. Then the next kind of farming is commercial agriculture, where the farming is done where the produce is for sale, and it is done on a large scale and with mechanized equipment. The next is dryland farming, that is agricultural technique for non-irrigated cultivation of land with little natural rainfall. Next is monoculture, that is growing one crop over a very large area, and this is of course achieved. The processes are very standardized for greater efficiency, and this results in the surplus of any one particular crop because it is grown over a very large area, and it can lead to depressed prices as a result. And the last is crop rotation, that is practice of growing dissimilar crops to improve soil structure and fertility by alternatively growing deep rooted and shallow rooted plants. So, this is the different type of agricultural farming that is practiced. I have already told you about traditional farming. Now, let us discuss about modern farming, and that is, of course, it uses extensively fertilizers as well as it uses pesticides. Another aspect of modern farming is that it reduces fertility. Then, as I told you earlier, deep plowing by the tractors results in soil erosion and loss of porosity. Then, of course, less biodiversity, as farms are monoculture and they grow the same crop and the same crop variety. So there is no alternative with other crops, other kind of crops. So the same kind of crops, the same kind of crop variety is grown. So over a very large area. So this is one of the other aspects of modern farming. Then exotic and hybrid varieties are grown, and indigenous plant existence has been threatened. So the traditional kind of plants which were always grown in India, they have gradually started becoming extinct. Then the food is contaminated with the chemicals that is used to produce it. That is another aspect of modern farming. Another aspect is that the supply and trading in agricultural inputs and produce is in the hands of large players, which threatens the food security, and it reduces the leverage, that is the bargaining power and the importance of the farmer and the consumer, because it is in the hands of a few, the people who can afford to buy those inputs which are needed for modern agricultural farming. So they can set their prices according to what they want to. The food security is accordingly not negotiable because of this reason. And also the habitat of the wild plants and wild animals is being destroyed because of the extensive use of fertilizers and pesticides. Now let's come out to another aspect of modern farming, and that is organic farming, which has now started taking center place gradually and in a very important way. Let us try to find out what exactly is organic farming. Organic cultivation is a type of farming that does not involve usage of chemicals like chemical fertilizers and pesticides. Major shift has been observed in the farming culture, due to which several farmers have begun practicing this kind of cultivation. And organic cultivation has proven to save food, and also it helps to preserve the environment. It uses organic fertilizers which are made from carbon, and this increases the productivity of the plants. The farms are also able to retain their fertility. Organic fertilizers are biodegradable, so they do not cause environmental pollution. And in this kind of farming, the nutrients are added only after the soil has been tested. So only the nutrients which are lacking in that soil are added, and not indiscriminate use of adding the nutrients irrespective of the kind of soil that it is being added to. So first the soil testing is done. In organic farming, organic seeds are also used, and the pesticides and the fungicides which are used are also organic in nature. And organic herbicides and mulching is used to control the weeds. Mulching is herbicides, you all would know what it is, but mulching is that the ground is covered with dry leaves. It is left like that, and then gradually the weeds, they are not able to grow because the ground is already covered, and that adds to the fertility of the soil, but at the same time the weeds do not grow because of this reason. So all these kind of practices are used in organic farming to control the weeds. At the same time, organic seeds are used, organic pesticides and fungicides and herbicides are used, so that the food that you get is chemical free and environmental friendly. Now, what is the benefits of having organic farming, apart from the reasons that I've just cited, is that in the world over there is a great demand for organic foods, and the demand is gradually going on increasing. So the producers are able to get better prices for their products, so they can have good quality and they can also command a premium price for their product. They can grow the produce without too much of investments, as the inputs are not very costly. They have less dependence because of this reason on the money lenders. There is also synergy with other life form plants, like other plants and other animals. And the demand for organic food is very high, so that is why they are also able to find a market for their produce. Now let's talk a little bit about what M.S. Swaminathan has to say about Indian agriculture. We have discussed at length about the different aspects of agriculture, how it has brought about greater self-reliance for the country. At the same time, we have the situation of stagnation in agricultural production now. So let us try to find out what the noted agriculturist Dr. M.S. Swaminathan has to say. He says, quote, "Agricultural policy making is largely in the hands of administrators, many of whom have little knowledge of farming and farmers. This is a self-inflicted injury which is hampering progress." Unquote. So what we find is that the agricultural policies have to be made by people who are aware of what are the different gamuts of agricultural production, how it is to be dealt with, what are the problems, and how they can be tackled, so that it is done in a very scientific way, and the agricultural produce increases as the population of the country is increasing. So increasingly we have to focus on agriculture to make it a very valuable and an increasingly contributor to our Indian economy. Now, let us also discuss a little bit about what are the expectations from the budget in the coming budget. And what we find is that the focus is likely to be on agriculture, as government is concerned about the stagnation in agricultural output. And as you know, during the time of the recession, there was a stimulus package which was given to the industry. It may partly be withdrawn, and the resources may be used for growth of agriculture. The government is also likely to increase the minimum support price of food grains, pulses and sugarcane, so as to motivate the farmer to produce more of these grains. Then, as you know, in the previous budget that was announced, the finance minister had allocated 14,167 crore for agriculture, and out of this 11,307 was for agricultural schemes and 439 crores was for irrigation. It is very expected that it is likely to be increased in the budgetary allocation for agriculture in the coming budget. In conclusion, we can say that change is happening in the rural areas, but it still has a very long way to go. Agriculture has benefited from improved farming techniques, but the growth has not been equitable. Land use is also changing in the rural areas as farmers are getting good value for their holdings. The effort should be now to stop the migration to the urban areas. And the government and the planners have to step up efforts to make a positive and equitable difference in the lives of the farmers and make agriculture occupy a place of pride in the nation's economy. Thank you.